This week, Jason, Zach, Billy, Trini, and Kimberly get dark and gritty in 2017's Power Rangers.
We're all screw-ups.
Why were you in detention?
I blew up my lunchbox.
I am chosen, you five, to become Power Rangers.
Whoa! No one man should have all that power.
She is pure evil. She must be stopped.
Do it better than anybody you ever seen. Do it.
Okay, now that's cool.
Power Rangers.
Rated PG-13 in theaters March 24th.
This is the Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we take one superhero film a week and decide whether it should be in the Pantheon, the pile of shame, or somewhere in between. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5 star review. So let's help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at The Real World are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so in 2 ways. First, send an email to superheropantheon@gmail.com. Second, find us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, we are reviewing a movie this week that I think is very much the victim of the dark and gritty thing that The Dark Knight caused, quote unquote, because what I think you have here is you have a mishmash of different visions. You, of course, have the Power Rangers, but they are a little bit darker. They are a little bit grittier. And you could see a little bit of Zack Snyder. You see a little bit of Christopher Nolan. I think there are aspects of this movie that are significantly better than the previous 2 movies. But I don't think that this movie is perfect. And I certainly understand why this movie did not make as much money as it probably should have.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like it didn't know what kind of genre it wanted to be. I mean, this movie's kind of all over the place. Like, literally. I mean, you literally got a horror movie going on in the background with Frida. You have this gritty action movie going on in the foreground with, like, this teen drama going on at the same time. It's just too much at once, and I think they try to do too many things. Like, they wanted to do Breakfast Club right off the bat, and then they wanted to do the martial arts stuff in the middle, and then they're throwing in the sci-fi background, which I think the movie just went a little too sci-fi. Just too many things going on, and then just the idea of, like, this city that's been there for millions of years with this fucking ship that's been underneath it for 65 million years. There's so many things going on, and it's hard to, like, take in. And I know that with the Power Rangers, it's supposed to be a fun family movie, but the way they're approaching it, it seems like taking it way too seriously, and it's not nearly the family movie that it should be. And because of that, you got all these mixing and clashing different genres together, and nothing's really sticking, and I think that's the problem.
I am somebody who, based on our conversation, I think I like this movie either a little bit more, perhaps significantly more, but we'll get into that and with some of our scores. I'll be very interested to see what your scores are. So this movie made $142 million, which is not terrible. But when you have a budget of about $100 million, that does not go into marketing fees or anything of that sort, and some of the dollar for dollar stuff doesn't quite work as well worldwide, you have a movie that was relatively unsuccessful, and you will probably not return to this version of the Power Rangers anytime soon. Bryan Cranston, who plays Zord on the film, had previously voiced a couple of the monsters from the 1993 version of the Power Rangers. And Brian, I think when you talk about some of the conflicted feelings of this movie, I think Bryan Cranston is kind of at the top of the list, because when you bring someone like this into the fold, we of course know him from his previous work on Malcolm in the Middle, and even more famously Breaking Bad. Go listen to Kevin Ford and I's Breaking Bad podcast that starts next week. But I think that you see a lot of the conflict here, because Bryan Cranston brings an intensity to Zordon that we have not yet seen in any of the previous movies or the TV shows.
Yeah, I don't know what the approach was for this. I think he took it way too seriously. I don't know, man. It just seems like he's in his own movie. Like it feels like he's in this like war drama or something, and everyone else is in like a sci-fi movie, but he's stuck in this like kind of like the way his voice sounds. It's almost as if he was like he's a war veteran pretty much. Like he's a past ranger, but I mean, it's just so weird seeing him through the wall and the way they did it with Zordon. I don't know. It didn't feel like the Zordon that I knew, and I know they were going for a different take, but I don't know. Bryan Cranston didn't just seem to. He didn't fit the role. I don't think. I think they should have got someone else. I think Mark Hamill would have done a hell of a lot better. Someone like that to kind of give it this kind of heart to it and some kind of personality. You know what I mean? I think the way Cranston did it was just too straight-laced. And the other weird thing I noticed that I didn't even realize at the time, but I guess his last name is Cranston. There's a character named Billy Cranston. Weird stuff like that. Maybe it was just meant to be he was on the original show doing voice actor work as one of the monsters. So I guess everything just came full circle for Bryan Cranston. That's why he decided to come back, sort of. But I think they kind of just, they could have done something else and gone with a different tone with it. You don't have to be so serious. It's like, especially with this Breaking Bad, like aura that he's got around him now. It's kind of the same thing that happened with Godzilla. I think he took that role a little too seriously as well, made it a little too heavy, and he kind of made the mood a little heavy. But it is what it is. I wanted something lighter.
I don't know if it's necessarily a problem with him, but perhaps it was more of a problem with the screenplay and some of the direction, because they were clearly going for something that was a little darker and grittier. And I think what you ended up with is with a Zordon that had more depth to him, but perhaps veered a little too close into the darker elements. And at a certain point, you're just like, Zordon's just being a dick. And I think that is kind of where it crosses the line for me. I appreciate some of what they were trying to do, and I did not necessarily have an issue with the visual look of Zordon. I am glad that Alpha was much more useful in this movie, and it felt like he was actually training the Power Rangers and just wasn't a source of comedic relief. I appreciated kind of what they were trying to do with Zordon and Alpha. I'm just not sure if it totally worked, because again, I think some of the tonal issues, I don't think this is, I almost wish that this had gone closer to something like the MCU as opposed to kind of DC, which is where they ended up being. This felt more like it would have played better in Zack Snyder's DC universe versus Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, that was the thing too. Like the second time viewing around, it felt like I was watching like the Superman versus Batman, Dawn of Justice version of Power Rangers, pretty much, and it's got that feel. I know, and we have mixed feelings on that movie, but I think when it comes to the Power Rangers, that's not the tone you need. It's got to have this like lighter tone to it, something that's easier to digest. But yeah, that kind of ties in with the Zordon thing. I just feel like it just took it way too different in that direction. And you're right, he's pretty much a dick. And Zordon's not supposed to be this dick. He's supposed to be this mentor figure, this father figure that they really didn't make it out to be. It just made it seem like he's this dude, this alien that's trying to train these rangers out of nowhere, and it's hard to believe, and you got 11 days and the clock's running and blah blah blah. So I don't know, they just try to throw in a lot with this character. I mean, I'm glad they threw in the background at the beginning of the movie. That was cool, but it didn't feel like the right tone.
I think if they made him prickly, I think that could have worked, but him, I think, becoming just a dick at certain points didn't work. I think you compare this to Batman versus Superman, I certainly felt some of that. But for me, I think this movie, especially the first 90 minutes to me, I think is just so much better. I think a lot of the reason that this movie works when it does is because of the young cast, and we'll get to them in just a couple minutes. But it is worth pointing out that the school that was used as Angel Grove High School in this film is the same school that was used for Smallville High on the 2011 through 2011 show Smallville. Naomi Scott actually cut off her hair in Kimberly's big haircut scene. Something else that's worth pointing out as far as the marketing of this movie, when the trailer was first released, this got 150 million views in its first 48 hours. And that is a big deal because you often hear these big numbers for the teaser trailers. So there was clearly a lot of interest, but I think as we've discussed, some of the tone of this movie had a lot to do with perhaps people being less inclined to see it. This movie did receive a PG-13 rating, whereas the previous two theatrical films had received PG ratings. And I think that also alludes to some of the darkness. I think something else that made this movie a little bit darker is the fact that Lionsgate released this. This is they are more associated with, I think, smaller budget movies, perhaps things that are a little bit on the darker side. This was originally supposed to come out in July of 2016, which I am very glad they did not release this in the summer. I don't think this really functions as a summer blockbuster at all. They did originally move it to January 2017, and then they pushed it again to March of 2017, which I did see this while I was in China. So there's a fun fact for you. I saw this in March of 2017 when I was in China.
I remember talking to you about that too, very clearly. And I was like, oh, how'd you like Power Rangers? Like, well, I'm watching it in China. I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool cultural experience. But yeah, I remember watching when it first came out and having like positive feelings about it. I mean, the marketing was cool, but overall, the second time around, I'm kind of seeing why it didn't stick with a lot of people. Yeah, and then it's just weird too. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but that classroom that they're in for the detention scene, like, it's stairs only. It's not even disabled friendly or, accessible. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. That kind of stuck out with me, and I was just like, wow. Like, only able-bodied people can go down that stairs and go to that classroom.
Based on what we could see. And I think it's good that you mentioned that, because I think one of the positive things about this element is that it is very inclusive. You have two prominent characters, one of whom is LGBT and the other who is on the autism spectrum scale. So that would be Trini and Billy respectively. So I think it's fascinating to me that whereas previous Power Ranger movies have not gone out of their way to make these characters feel individual, I almost think, in a way, they almost went too far the other way. And I think that's kind of a representation of this movie in general, is I think they were trying too hard to go dark and gritty, that they were trying to individualize these characters so much that they almost went too far. But I do think it is worth noting that we do have two prominent characters that do have one of whom has a disability and the other of whom is LGBT. And I think those are positive things. These are things that we have not seen in a lot of other superhero movies. We have not seen any major superheroes actually be LGBT, and we really have not had a lot of characters who are disabled. I think Daredevil, who is blind, but other than that, we really have not had that. So I do want to cite those as two progressive and important steps and two good things about this movie.
Yeah, I think that's the actual cool part of this movie. Like, that's the best thing going for it, this inclusivity thing. Because when I first read the plot line and how like they were going to make these characters different and make a gay character and a disabled character, I thought that's fantastic. Like, finally, like, that seems more logical to me than picking these like 5 random teens that seem like the same, personalities and stuff like that. That was one of the weaknesses I didn't like about the Power Rangers, or at least the new ones, when they kept introducing new ones and becoming blander and blander. But here, I thought that's such a great concept. Like, I even had this idea for a comic back in high school, like a bunch of disabled people get superpowers and they have to go out and be heroes, and kind of like, someone in a wheelchair gets the superpower to fly in the air, something like that. I thought something like that would be really cool, and that kind of ties in with this idea. You know what I mean? So I thought that was really one of the big draws for me going to this movie, that, okay, they're doing something different and they're building up the characters well. And they switched some things up. Like they made Zach Asian and the Black Ranger, and then they made Billy Black and the Blue Ranger. So just little things like that. And it does maybe seem kind of forced, but at the same time, it seems like a realistic picture of like the kind of high school that I grew up in LA. And I know that's, for a lot of people, pretty different in terms of the makeup of, diversity and all that kind of thing. But for me, for a person that, grew up in, San Fernando Valley, Los Angeles area, I experienced a lot of diversity. So seeing a cast like this made so much more sense to me than just your typical, whitewash cast Hollywood stuff. You know what I mean? Like, this diversity that they pushed in this movie, I loved it because it just felt like a normal day in high school for me.
A couple more notes here before we get into the rest of the movie. When the Zords charge into the battle, the theme song from the Power Rangers 1995 movie is heard. They originally had an orchestral score of the Power Rangers theme, but they decided to use the original one instead. I would be curious to know how the scene plays with the orchestral score, because when they actually queued up the 1995 version, especially because that version was so fresh in my head, it almost felt inappropriate to have this theme playing.
I mean, it felt out of place, but at the same time, that's the score that I wanted. Like, because I feel like the score that we got is very forgettable outside of the music choices and like the Kanye West song and all that kind of thing. But I felt like that was the one time I was like, yeah, okay, this music is getting me going. And I feel like that's the kind of Power Rangers music you need, that upbeat, almost like workout type music. And to bring the original music back, I was like, God damn it, just give me the whole theme throughout the whole movie instead of this one time in the movie just like a callback, because I felt like the soundtrack was really lacking. And then when I heard the original music, I was like, God damn, just do the whole movie like that. But it is what it is, and I feel like they made a mistake in that area.
So it's funny that you mentioned the soundtrack, because I think one of the most awkward moments of the movie actually was when they chose to use the 1995 version of the Power Rangers theme as opposed to an orchestral score. And for me, that really did not make a lot of sense, because the tone of the two movies is just so different. And it played really awkward in my head.
Yeah, I get that feeling too, but I feel like if you're going to go old school, just go full out, you know what I mean? It's like, that was one of the things with the last Spider-Man movie. They teased us with the old Spider-Man theme, and they didn't give it fully to us. So that's kind of what I want. I know that the tone would have been different, but maybe that's kind of what the movie needed, because I felt the tone was too serious at times, and that kind of reflected the score, and then the score wasn't fun. And I feel like the Power Rangers score should be fun, like the 90s show.
Well, and then you have an Amy Jo Johnson and a Jason David Frank cameo appearance, and I understand why you would do that, because you're trying to kind of harken back to the old days of the Power Rangers. But this franchise is just completely new, and I think we've seen this issue with a number of franchises that have tried to reboot things, but still try to maintain either the tone or harken back to this. I think Ghostbusters had a very similar problem to this. And I just don't know how you do this in a way that makes sense. I think that what you almost have to do is you have to go one way or the other, and you can't try to please everyone. And I think that has been the problem with a lot of these legacy sequels, is that they have tried to please everyone. And ultimately what happens is that you end up with some sort of a disaster or some sort of a mess. And I don't know. I think it's a real challenge for a lot of these studios. And I think this movie is a representation of that.
I get that, and that's probably going to be the issue in the coming movie as well, because we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks, but they're going to bring back some of the older actors, probably, maybe, most likely for like a crossover kind of thing from the past generations, and I get that. And I kind of want that still, and I want that kind of fan service, because I'm not up to date with these new Power Rangers, and I'm sure you're not either, obviously, but there is a generation out there that is, and you kind of want to connect to all those generations with this one brand. So I kind of get that. I'm glad that, these two came back, and they still look young, man. I'm like, God damn, they still look good. They can probably still pull it off and be Rangers. I thought, like, why not do that maybe as a movie, like having old Rangers come back? And it's, I'm always part of that storyline of one last ride or one last, gunslinger kind of thing, one last duel or whatever. And I wouldn't mind seeing that with these two in the Power Rangers, and then bring back, as many of the originals as you can. But I get that they did this in the Ghostbusters sense, where they come back as some other characters. I thought it would be cool if they were like Jason's parents, but they didn't do that. I thought that would have been too meta. Well,
you mentioned that, but they cast an actor who looks very similar to that actor to play Jason's father.
I think that's just coincidence, because if you look at him now, yeah, he does look like him because he gained some weight and got the beard going. But, I mean, to me, that's always going to be the fiance from The Office, that guy. So that's unfortunate.
All right, let's get to the actual categories. So basically what happens is Billy, Jason, and Kimberly, they get a lot of time to be developed. And they are clearly the main characters, as we start off with Jason apparently stealing a cow and putting it in the locker room. I think this is kind of a mascot thing. When we talk about the tone of this, I think this is a representation, because I appreciate what they're trying to do with Jason. They are trying to individualize him. They are trying to make the Power Rangers less perfect and not basically kids from Saved by the Bell. So I appreciate that, but the whole thing just feels very weird, because he runs away and then he seriously injures himself. the impression that I got while watching this, Brian, I don't know if you feel the same, but to me it felt like they wanted him to get nabbed for drunk driving, but they didn't have the guts to go all the way with that. It is also worth pointing out that the person who's playing Jason, Dacre Montgomery, is Billy from Stranger Things.
Yeah, he's definitely the best. I don't know if he's the best, but he's definitely got some charisma to him, and he's got this leadership quality stuff to him that I can totally see why they casted him in this role as Jason. He's kind of that perfect leader kind of role that's kind of rejects the whole notion of being a leader at first, and then, you know, kind of accepts it at the end, kind of the whole story arc of being a leader and learning how to be a leader. So I get that. And he's a good actor, man, and I think he's even better in Stranger Things, obviously, but here he kind of reminds me of like a young Chris Pine. I don't know if you feel that too. Like a young Chris Pine and in the first Star Trek movie, I kind of got that vibe to him a little bit here. Mixed with a little bit of Shawn Michaels, you know, that's a little wrestling thrown in there, but you know what I mean. He's a little bit cocky here and there, but he's definitely got that HBK vibe to him as well. But I like the way he leads the team. And yeah, I don't know, something about him kind of, there's this aura to him about, you know, he's got this star power to him. I think that he's got potential as an actor to do more. I think he's got to do more, you know, he's got to get more roles as like the star, I think, to break out, because I think he's got a potential to break out like a Chris Pine can.
Certainly. And I think when you are in Stranger Things and have such a prominent role in that is also going to make a difference. And the way that they develop this character, where he's kind of very much kind of an asshole at the start of this movie, but grows into being a leader, I think they do that fairly well throughout the course of this movie, and probably has one of the better character arcs. Another person who I think has a good character arc is Naomi Scott's Kimberly, who is very much her own person. And I think you get kind of this very modern angle with her basically slut-shaming one of her friends. And that's one of the reasons that Kimberly is no longer one of the most popular people in school. And I think I appreciated that they try to bring this modern angle to it. And I think even more so than Dacre Montgomery, I think Naomi Scott has a ton of star potential. And at some point, she is going to get in a good movie and get out of these franchises, kind of what's happened with Aladdin and with Charlie's Angels and this movie, where she's trying to fill somebody else's shoes and has kind of mixed success. Naomi Scott is somebody who I think is going to be a star, and I think you see a lot of that here. She does have very good chemistry with Dacre Montgomery, and it's a shame we won't get any sequels, because I think the romantic angle is something that would have worked for these two.
Yeah, I think she gives the best performance in the movie, to be honest. Like, out of everybody, I thought she was the best. She had like a very unique story arc, and then her emotions were very complex, and she didn't know how to feel at times, and she was trying to deal with that, and I got that. And like, you know, accepting new friends, you know, getting rid of old friends. That scene with the hair makes sense now, because it's like, you know, throwing away her old self and becoming this new person. Very symbolic. So I like that scene. Everything kind of made sense with her arc too. So I like her performance a lot. And even though I didn't see Charlie's Angels, I was like, you know, I thought she was pretty good in Aladdin. I thought some of the people, or the reviews that I saw about Aladdin, were like, maybe they just should have made it about Jasmine and centralized the movie about Jasmine and make it about her. And I think, yeah, that would have been a good twist and make it modern. But yeah, she's definitely got star power. I mean, to me, she's already almost like a star. I mean, the fact that she was Jasmine in Aladdin in a $1 billion movie, I don't know, that says a lot to me. So,
but she's not getting her own Disney Plus series like that white prince from Aladdin that nobody remembers is getting.
Yeah, we'll see how far that goes.
We will see. So I can understand why you would say Naomi Scott gives the best performance. I think R.J. Cyler, who plays Billy, actually gives the best performance in this movie. I think he is very much the heart and soul of it. He is portrayed to be kind of the most noble right from the start. He's the first one to actually be able to morph, because that is one of the things, that is one of the elements that this movie brings to the forefront, is that it is within them to morph. They just have to kind of develop themselves and kind of reach down and realize the kind of people that they can be. We see that Billy is intelligent, but he has trouble relating to people emotionally, because, of course, he is on the autism scale. R.J. Cyler is somebody who I've seen in other things. He was on a Showtime show that nobody watched, but he was very good in it. And it's a shame that this movie did not do well, because I think he is somebody who could have grown into this role and probably gotten other projects because of it. I know that Naomi Scott and Dr. Montgomery have been able to kind of transfer to other things, but we really have not seen that as much yet with Arte Seiler. That is certainly something I hope that's coming, because I think he's really, really outstanding as Billy.
Yeah, he's pretty good too in this movie. I like how he is the one that is the first one to transform. I thought that was really cool. And to me, it was kind of obvious because he is, he's very innocent and naive and pure of heart. So obviously he might be the first one to kind of tap into that and kind of make the connection and connect the dots to make it. And he did. And he's the first one to find the stone and all that. And, Rita goes after him immediately because she knows that he's the smartest one and can find the stone for her. So I thought, he was really a more important character than the Billy that we got in the original 93 version. I think they did it a lot better, taking the character and, redefining it. And, the only thing, though, I thought is like, man, he really gets away with explosives. That was the only thing that kind of crossed my mind, because he causes a lot of explosives or explosions and gets away with it somehow, I guess.
That is certainly the case. I think when it comes to the other two characters, Zach and Trini, I don't think we get to know them as well, but we actually do get to see them in kind of their home environments. And Trini is very much kind of the ignored child, and Zach is trying to take care of his mom. So we kind of understand what each of the Rangers is going through. And I think individualizing them makes a difference. And that is what makes the first 90 minutes of this movie very compelling to me, is the fact that we are invested in these characters, even when there are moments that don't work. And even when Zordon crosses the line into just being a dick, I think the fact that these 5 characters are very engaging is why I'm giving this a 7 as opposed to a lower score. I also want to mention, Brian, do you even realize who the voice of Alpha 5 is?
Yes, it's Bill Hader. And, he was doing the Bill Hader. He was being funny, random jokes that make no sense at certain contexts of the movie, but he made them, and that's Alpha for you, I guess.
And I do appreciate that there are families, there are parents. They don't do very much, but at least they're there. And I think one of the biggest problem that I have in this movie is I don't think the last half hour of this movie is very good. I think it just becomes kind of a CGI garbled mess. But I think one of the best moments of that final half hour is when Jason, as the Red Ranger, saves his father. Perhaps it's a bit more of an obvious moment, but I think something that superhero movies have gotten away from is them saving normal people and portraying normal people. And this was a specific instance of a character who is clearly connected to the real world, actually saving someone in the real world. And that was a moment that I appreciated.
Yeah, that was a cool moment too. This is gonna be my highest score. Like, I'm gonna give it a 7. Very solid cast. I just felt like maybe some of the chemistry was missing between them in certain parts of the movie, but once they got there, like, they started connecting, and by the end, they got their chemistry together. And like we mentioned before, 2 potential stars in the making and the cast. So, other than Zordon being a dick, you got to include that as well as the hero score. I think if Zordon was more of that noble, Jedi mentor type character that I'm so used to, that Obi-Wan type character, I think it would have been a higher score. But because of that, it's going to be a 7.
Right. And I think in talking about the villains, of course, really there are only 2 villains. We have Elizabeth Banks hamming it up as Rita. I think she does her best. Doesn't really get a whole lot to do. And I think the kind of the tone of this movie, something that you've addressed many times, is some of the issues that you have. And I think Elizabeth Banks really represents that well, in that she is almost going for this very big and granular Ivan Ooze-like performance, and it doesn't totally work. And I'm specifically referring to the jewelry scene when she talks about wanting gold. And it's almost to the point where you can parody it. And the Honest trailer for this movie actually does, where they reference Goldmember, the Austin Powers movie. And I think that is a significant problem. You also have Goldar as a monster, not an actual character. And because Elizabeth Banks as Rita does not really have anyone to bounce off of or talk to, the villains are almost irrelevant in this case, or they don't really matter as much. So I had a real hard time with the score, because I do like some of what Elizabeth Banks is doing. I do like the character design of Rita, but I do not like the character design of Goldar.
Yeah, we're pretty much on the same page on everything. The only thing I give them credit for is actually kind of revealing, or you kind of have to figure it out, but they kind of reveal it at the end that she was in fact the Green Ranger, right? And that she turned evil, and that's why they kind of allude that the Green Ranger is going to come with Tommy Oliver and blah blah blah, like the original storyline. But it's pretty clear the fact that she's got the green, her jewel is green, that she was the Green Ranger. So I thought that was a really cool twist they added to that. But I guess that's more of like the story aspect of it. But in terms of the performance, yeah, she's trying to do some kind of weird, I don't know, cheesy performance. But the fact that they kind of played her off as a horror movie villain at first, because she's literally murdering people right off the bat. And there's that creepy scene on the boat where they throw her body amongst the fishes and you see her mangled corpse. And I'm just thinking like, wow, they found her body at the exact same time the Rangers happened to find the stones. Like, what are the crazy odds of that? And the fact that they haven't found the body yet by then, it's like 65 million years ago and you just found the body. It was a little weird. It's hard to buy into, but we'll get that to the story. But in terms of that and what they did with Goldar, yeah, I'm not too happy about that. I'll still go with a 4 though, because Elizabeth Banks is trying. I do like the way that, I don't know, just, I guess it's more of the story, but the background they give her and the Green Ranger twist. So I'll go with a 4 on the villains. I know it's maybe a little too much credit, but I could go a lower, but I'm not going to go too low.
I am also giving this a 4, so I think this is another case of us agreeing. I think we are going to split starting with the next category, but for me, I like Elizabeth Banks. I don't necessarily like kind of the Rita character. And again, I think this is one of those movies where you almost need a sequel to develop these characters more. Because clearly they had an idea of what they were going to do with Rita and possibly even moving her to the moon for her hideout. Let's get to the story. So Jason gets into a really bad car accident as the movie starts and then gets driven to Saturday detention. I don't even know if Saturday detention is still a thing, but it is in this movie. If the first movie was Power Rangers meets Saved by the Bell, then this is Power Rangers meets The Breakfast Club. Kimberly is abandoned by her friends and cuts her hair. Billy is black and he is autistic and he does not have his father. One of the things, Brian, I don't know if this came across to you, but when they were referencing his father, did you get the sense that his father was looking into the Power Rangers himself, and that's one of the reasons that he was killed, or that's why he died? Because it wasn't made clear to me, and I was thinking, is that what they were going for?
See, that's what I thought of at first, and the second time around, I was like, I guess that's what it is. Like, he's just trying to find what his father was looking for, but they don't really go into that, and I was like, I guess that's the only way they can bridge the idea of him looking for something, and then that leads them to the stones in the middle of that mountain. I mean, I guess it was just kind of like something they had to come up with, because it just felt like, okay, we need a reason. We don't have a great reason. Here's the reason that they end up at the mountain looking for the stones. I think that was just the way they had to put it together. And that's kind of the weaknesses that, I'm going to talk about more of, but that's one of the story weaknesses that I wasn't really all for.
So we get the Rangers eventually meeting up and going into the cave. I do like the design of the cave, and I do like some of what they did with the water. We get the Rangers. We got another really bad car accident. We get to it like the first 30 minutes, and it was almost bordering on self-parodying. They all mysteriously wake up in their own beds. We don't know how, and they're super strong, and they behave like teenagers who got special powers by jumping across a cliff and acting like morons. One of the things I know that you love, Brian, is when characters sit around and get drunk, and I feel like the scene where they are jumping across the cliff and acting like morons is the equivalent of that. And then there is a scene later on when they are talking about each other, getting to know each other around a fire. And again, I think those are two really good scenes that showcase the chemistry of this cast, and show the potential of what this team could have been in future movies. So I really liked those two scenes in particular, because we got to know them as people and not just as generic morphing machines.
Yeah, I like those two scenes a lot. Maybe more so the one jumping, because I thought that was just really, well shot for what it looked like. Because that was one of the only shots that's like in the daytime, bright and brightly lit. You could see things clearly. But yeah, I just felt like I like the Breakfast Club aspect to it. I like the way they meet. The sci-fi stuff of the story get just this. That's what throws me off. I feel like I do like that they establish this connection in the first 90 minutes with the characters, and you give this great character development. But then you do the Rita stuff, and it just feels like a cheesy, bad horror movie that all of a sudden you're watching. And then all of a sudden, at the beginning of the movie, you got this like sci-fi thing going on with these aliens from 65 million years ago, and these dinosaurs in the background. It's like it's a lot to intake. So I just felt like they went all over the place with the script here, and they just went from all these different genres, your Breakfast Clubs, your all these other different genres, and just kind of combining them. And then I just felt like you needed to stick to one genre in this case. I don't know, they just tried too many different things. I think they should have just taken less of the sci-fi stuff, maybe do more of the fantasy kind of element to it, make it more mystical. I thought maybe they just made it a little too scientific with the background stuff, but I don't know, it's weird because like you said, those two scenes are great, but when you go into the other stuff, developing the plot, it gets too much and too complicated, I feel like. And I don't know. I know that's the essence of the Power Rangers in itself, but the way that they kind of rewrote the original, storyline and kind of making it modern and stuff like that, they just tried to do too much. It felt like there was two movies going on at the same time. Like one movie is them becoming the Power Rangers, and the other movie is them fighting Rita, and they kind of combined the two. And that's the other thing too. I kind of felt like the story was just a little too long. Like they turned into the Rangers 90 minutes of the movie. I could have gone with them turning into the Rangers maybe an hour and 10 into the movie and going from there. Felt like I know what they were going for with the build-up in terms of the story. Like you don't want to show them as the Rangers until the very end and kind of have this Jaws kind of build-up, and I get that, but I'm just so like I just want to see the suits, and I want to see them in suits fighting and stuff like that. I think they just kind of built it up too much, even though they had great character development. So it's kind of hard to have that balance. You know what I mean?
I think them becoming the Rangers and also trying to introduce the Zords in the same movie was really, really difficult. And I almost wonder, it's almost impossible to conceive of something Power Rangers related without the Zords. But I almost wonder if they would have been better off just having them be the Power Rangers in the final 30 minutes and get away from the CGI mess that it was, because this basically becomes a Transformers movie where it's just robots punching each other. And that to me fundamentally is not interesting. And even when they're in the suits, they're not really wearing their masks and we see their faces. And that's something the superhero movies do all the time. And it's kind of annoying, the fact that they are supposed to be hiding their identities, and yet they're in their Zords with their faces out. So that was really bizarre to me. I really liked the first 90 minutes. And, Brian, you have to give this movie credit because we had a good old-fashioned training montage in this movie that actually pays off. Yeah,
that's one of the things, too. I thought that maybe they should have done it the more of the Rocky style theme of the montage, but they went modern with it, and I get that. And it's very cliche, but at the same time I'm thinking like, God, they got to learn how to fight in 11 days. I don't know if that's like a realistic thing, but who knows? They got superpowers now. I guess they can just go with it. If Rey can learn how to be a Jedi in like one day, why not, right? So I kind of have to let that go. But that's kind of some of the aspects of the script that I'm just thinking like, God, like I don't know how this kind of plays out. Like, how can no one after 65 million years find the ship before that? How come there weren't no Rangers in the last 65 million years? Or that should have been, I don't know. It feels like they would have found all that stuff way, way before all this stuff going on in the modern day. Like, I just felt like someone would have found those stones. Someone would have found the ship. They would have found Rita's body much sooner. I felt like everything was just kind of weird, and just the whole thing of the timing of everything was just too, convenient, I felt, for this movie. But at the same time, it's a Power Rangers movie. You're supposed to let go of those kind of things, and I get that. But if you're going to go with a serious tone, I'm going to take some of these other aspects of the movie more seriously. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yes, we are certainly not breaking down the merits of the 1995 and 1997 Power Rangers movies nearly as in-depth as we are. So in trying to come up with an appropriate score here, I came up with a 7 because I really do like the first 90 minutes of this movie. I really don't like the final half hour of this movie because, again, I think it just becomes this big mess of a movie. And to me, it's not even necessarily that some of the stuff is kind of janky. I understand that. But I certainly think that there are some things when you go to a movie like this that you are ultimately signing up for. And so that some of that doesn't really bother me as much. But the one thing I will say, Brian, is I fed you an opportunity. The payoff to the training montage is something that is very important to both of us. What was the maneuver that was used to help pay off this montage?
All I remember was a bitch slap, and if I get this wrong, I guess I wasn't paying too much attention because I don't know what that says.
How do you not remember the fact that it was a German suplex?
Oh, man, because I was saving that as the last line of the freaking podcast. But whatever, it's okay. It's okay. They did a German suplex, and yeah, that's very much... Someone obviously was a wrestling fan because I think it's also an homage to like this giant statue in Japan where I think it's Giant Baba doing a German suplex on someone, and it's a giant statue, and it almost looks exactly like that statue. But yeah, that was going to be the last line of the podcast, but now I have to think of something else.
All right, what is your story score?
Go with a 6 just because it's all over the place. In some areas they excelled, in some areas they just went way too crazy with. So, I mean, I don't think they should have went with the horror element with Rita. That's the way I would not have done it. So.
All right, I am so fascinated to see what your technical score is going to be because I really love the design of the caves in the water. I love the design of the command center because it feels realistic in a good way. I love the design of Angel Grove as kind of this crappy small town. I think it works. What doesn't work again is the last half hour. I talked about this with the story. I think a lot of it has to do with the technical aspects. There are times when I like the suits, but they almost feel a little bit too CGI heavy. And I wish that there was a way to better merge the way that we do these suits for these superhero movies so that they could be at least somewhat realistic. But I think the major problem is that the Zords, I don't think look very good. And I think it's really hard to decipher them and really kind of tell some of the differences. I really did not like the design of Goldar. But I did like some of the pacing choices. I did like some of the soundtrack, Brian. You have a great opportunity to talk about the soundtrack, especially given one of the songs that plays over the end credits. So for my technical score, I'm giving this a 7.
Yeah, man, this was probably one of the weaker aspects for me because I don't know. I just felt like the Brian Tyler score was not memorable at all. At least they had Kanye West, so that was kind of cool. I mean, I was like, okay, Power Rangers, Kanye West, that's fine. I can accept that. The look of the suits was just kind of like I wasn't feeling it. I felt like there was too much clunkiness, too much plastic on it, not enough maneuverability. It's kind of like the movie, the Ezra Miller Flash movie costume. I'm not too much of a fan of it, even though I like the color of it. I just feel like it's too clunky, too many plastic coverings, and that's what they did with this suit in the Power Rangers, and I'm not really a fan of it. And the fact that you mentioned that the third act, they're in the Zords, they should have the goddamn masks on. Why even have the suit on if you're just not going to even have the mask, on at the same time? It was weird. I didn't like that at all. I get it, like the Hollywood thing. We have to see their faces. We can't hide their faces for the last 20 minutes of the freaking movie when we saw their faces plenty of times in the first 90 minutes. So that really frustrated me because it's supposed to be, them in the suits, masks down, in the Zord. That's what Power Rangers is, and they didn't do that. And, Goldar, like you mentioned, was just this creature that had no personality, and that kind of ruined it for me because I really like the Goldar that we get in the show, that comedic, comic relief kind of character, and they totally did away with that. Yeah, the look of Alpha I thought was just kind of weird, the way they did his arms, and I was like, God, just make a robot, like an R2-D2 live action, practical robot. And they did a CGI shtick, and it just came off looking weird. I didn't like the look of Zordon, the way that he was so pixelized. I kind of was waiting for him to do that thing where when he powers down, you see the body of Zordon, but they killed off his physical body in the beginning of the movie. A lot of weird stuff going on. The colors of the suits, like, God, this is kind of weird to say. Like, it's like they raise the contrast a little too high. That's kind of like my style when I do color correction on like photos and my trading cards and stuff. But it's for a certain aesthetic, you know what I mean? But if you do it in a movie, it makes the colors seem darker when they're actually bright. You know what I mean? Like, you look at the yellow. It happens in Batman vs. Superman. It happens in a lot of the Zack Snyder movies where you see like a bright yellow, but it's so muted down in the lighting, and the lighting kind of takes it away from it. So you get these darker blacks and these darker reds when the red should be a little bit brighter, You know what I mean? Like, 'cause when I think of the Red Ranger suit, I think of a bright red suit. But in this movie, it kind of comes a little too dark. They added a little too much black shading and little parts to it. It's not a physical, like a solid red color. You know, like, I know I'm nitpicking all the technical stuff, but this is the way I just kind of see it. You know what I mean? And I just felt like the CGI was not that good towards the end. And I didn't like the fact that we didn't know what the hell was going on when they went inside that, I don't know, the middle of the core of the Earth, and they come back out as like this. It wasn't, see, to me, like, it looked like a Gundam, you know, like from Gundam Wing, that anime, and it should look like a Zord, and it didn't come out looking like a Zord, and we didn't get to see that transition where, like, the arms come together and the Zords come together. They put that in this weird looking thing in the fire, and you can barely see what's going on, and by the time it comes out, it's like, what the hell just happened? And, like, you know, you mentioned it too, like, the look of the Zords is not that good. I was just kind of really disappointed with a lot of the aspects of the cinematography of this movie as well. Like, it looks like they were going for a Michael Bay Transformers movie. And one prime example of that is one of the first shots of the movie you see of Angel Grove High School or whatever. It's like a tilted angle wide shot. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what Michael Bay does to create this weird looking space, you know, this, like, these wide shots that he does. And I felt like they were going for that Michael Bay effect. And a lot of the shots of this movie are kind of angled, tilted in a weird kind of way. And I think at least 65 to 70% of this movie shot in the dark at night. And I didn't like that at all because you can't see shit. I know you like the caves, but I just felt like you could hardly see anything in the caves. And the ship was just way too big, I thought, and too generic looking. And I'm like, come on, man, this ship's been around for 65 million years and there's no rust and everything's perfect. Like, nothing added up that should have been what it felt like. Nothing added up in my mind the way it should have looked like on screen. It felt like nothing really added and connected well. And the fact that the score, they only played the original theme for that brief moment in time, like I mentioned already. It was frustrating, man. So I have to give this a 4. For a modern movie, I'm usually a lot nicer on my scores, but I just felt like they just missed on all the aspects of what make Power Rangers cool. And, like, just do, like, the old school effects and just give me, like, a dude in a suit, and you just put him on a green screen and just make him look bigger, and you have this dude in a suit, you know what I mean? Instead of, like, this CGI gold schmear, whatever that was.
I don't know what the solution is, because I don't necessarily think that what you're proposing is realistic either. I think that would make it look cheap too. I don't know what the solution is. I almost wish they had punted on the Zords for the reason that they clearly wanted to manage their budget, and I think it shows with the CGI. Like I said, I almost wish there was a way to just keep the Zords away from this movie and just focus on the character development and focus on them becoming Power Rangers. And if you want to tease the Zords for the next movie, which would never come, but I think it would have turned out to be better if they had done that as opposed to doing the Zords the way they did.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because, I don't know, practical effects I think sometimes work better. Maybe it's just the director or the type of director, or just maybe this director had no idea how to shoot CGI shots, and just that's the way it came out, because it just felt too CGI heavy, like way too heavy. Like, it almost felt like the end of the Thor #1, but like times like 10, like way too much on a small town.
Which is funny, because I feel like the first 90 minutes, there of course was CGI used in the first 90 minutes, but it just felt so well integrated that I didn't notice it as much, at least for me. And then the final half hour of it, it didn't work. Speaking of things that didn't work, let's talk about the legacy of this movie. We have not talked about this yet, but the blatant product placement of Krispy Kreme is weird, and I don't like it because it was just so prominently featured, and it was so blatantly obvious that Krispy Kreme paid all the money in the world for this level of advertisement, and it was just weird, and I did not like it. We have more to talk about with the legacy, but I do want to spend a minute just focusing on how weird this Krispy Kreme thing was.
Yeah, when you got dialogue that's centered around Krispy Kreme, you know you've sold out. And the fact that they had Elizabeth Banks go inside the Krispy Kreme and eat a donut right before she destroys it, it's like, how does she even know what a donut is? Like, does she just go in there? I don't know. It's a lot of weird things going on, but that was talk about like Transformers Mountain Dew level of explicit, you know what I mean, from the first Transformers movie. But goddamn.
Just so weird and just so strange. The rest of the legacy, this is not a movie that did very well at the box office, but when you consider the tone, it's very close to a short film that Joseph Kahn had made about a decade earlier featuring Katie Sackhoff and James Van Der Beek. So it's very interesting that that is the direction that they went into. I think this is a great cast. I think many of the people in this movie are going to go on to do great things, particularly Naomi Scott, of course, who has already done Aladdin. This presented a character on the spectrum and LGBTQ. I do think that that is part of its legacy in a positive way. I do think that this movie is ultimately a victim of the dark and gritty syndrome that encompassed so many movies that have come out since The Dark Knight in 2008. And for those reasons, I'm right down the middle. My legacy score is a 5.
I'll go with the 6 just because I felt like, I mean, without this movie, like Naomi Scott would not have maybe had the opportunity to be in Aladdin. Same for, I forget his name already, Dacer or whatever. But Billy from Stranger Things, that's always what I'm going to call him. And yeah, that's what I'm going to call him. But yeah, I just felt like, you know, I could have gone lower, but looking back and seeing those two, it's like I feel like their stock kind of started here to rise just from this. So, and then, I mean, because Stranger Things was already in season 1, I think it was already done by that point, and I think they saw this movie like, okay, we need this guy, this is the perfect guy to do the role, and he's so good on Stranger Things season 2 and 3, so credit to him. And Naomi Scott, like I already mentioned before, I thought she was the best performance in this movie, and then the fact that it's all like this all-inclusive kind of style of cast, I thought that was really effective. But you know, the box office does kind of speak for itself, and the fact that we're not getting a direct sequel to this. Maybe, I don't know, because the next Power Rangers movie that is being planned is this multiverse crossover thing. Maybe they can make reference to that and maybe have Billy come as a cameo. That'd be kind of cool, maybe. But that's the only way I see them kind of reconnected to this universe ever again. So I'll go with a 6 just because I'm being a little nicer in this category. And there was some stock on the rise because of this movie.
All righty, let's go to the total scores. My total score is a 30.
Mine is a 27.
The total score is 57, and I think the best thing that can be said about this movie is that while it certainly did expose the potential of the individual characters, I don't think that this movie ultimately works because of the final half hour, the lack of the Zords, and just some of the weirdness of the tones. I think that's ultimately why this movie received a 57. But if I'm being honest, I think there are a couple changes that you make to this movie, and this could be something that's close to the pantheon, because I think they nailed the stuff that so many other comic movies don't do well, the character stuff. And I think some of the things that the MCU has been able to do with the spectacle and being able to manage that, those are the things that this movie doesn't do well. And it's unfortunate because I think if the last half hour of this movie works, I think this is close to joining our pantheon.
I kind of see what you mean, because that the strength, like I said, is the heroes and the way they have the character development. Sort of reminds me of Doom Patrol. That's what I've kind of mentioned this maybe a couple times before, but Doom Patrol has fantastic character development, but really like borderline average forward progression in terms of storyline. So that's kind of what I see here. It's like you can have this great character development, but everything else has to start clicking. Otherwise, it's just going to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I very much feel you when it comes to that part of it and thinking and making the comparison that you did to Doom Patrol. I think you're exactly right. Let's go to the burning questions. What is the biggest reason this movie didn't do well at the box office?
It just played with too many genres, and I think the PG-13 kind of speaks to that, because traditionally the family style Power Rangers that we're used to is like a PG level fun style, and they went a little too dark with it here, and it did feel like it appealed to families. Like it appealed to more people, more so our age, maybe in their 20s, like that nostalgia kind of crowd. But I think that was the wrong kind of crowd to go with. I think you wanted to go with more of the family crowd and kind of make it more appealing to everybody.
Unfortunately, I don't think there is the level of interest in the Power Rangers. Yes, I know the trailer got 150 million views, but I don't think that there is a lot of interest in this franchise as a movie. I think it certainly is going to continue to work as a television show. It did make $142 million worldwide. But the reality is I just don't think there is enough interest in this franchise to make it sustainable at the budget that they wanted to. So that's kind of where I come down. Best rebooted franchise movie starring Naomi Scott, Power Rangers, Aladdin, or Charlie's Angels?
I think I liked Aladdin more than Power Rangers, to be honest. At least Aladdin, like, I had smiles on my face and I was entertained. I did have a smile on my face here and there for this movie, but not nearly as much. And I felt like at least Aladdin used colors much better, and and shot better stuff in the daytime than what this movie did.
So unlike you, I have actually seen Charlie's Angels, but I feel pretty confident in putting it definitively as number 3. I think all 3 of these movies have positive things about them. They also have very distinctive flaws. And I think I could go on all day about the flaws of Aladdin. It is not as bad as Lion King. Lion King is an abomination. Aladdin is just kind of meh. I am going to say the Power Rangers because I think it is at least trying to do something different, unlike both Aladdin and Charlie's Angels, which feel like rehashes of previous franchises. So for that reason, I am saying Power Rangers. Who is your favorite Ranger from this movie?
Kimberly, man, I just felt like, okay, A, she had the best performance, Naomi Scott, but B, like, I felt like she was the better leader, even though Jason was labeled the leader. I felt like she was a better decision maker. And, it was Jason's decision to go in and fight Rita without transforming or morphing first and, nearly killing Billy. Or he did die, actually, and they brought him back to life. But I thought she was just more level-headed, and then I think she understood the gravities of the situation much more than the other 4. So to me, I think she was my favorite, not just the performance, but just in terms of smarts, man. I think she was a better leader than Jason.
I could make the argument for Kimberly. I'm going to be different and just say Billy because I think he is just really good. I think R.J. Ellers just does a spectacular job throughout this movie of kind of being the heart and soul. I think he has the hardest role in the movie, having to play somebody who is on the spectrum. So I'm going to say Billy. He is my favorite Ranger, and it is not just because my favorite color is blue.
I feel you on that, because when I was a kid, blue was my favorite color. There automatically, my favorite Ranger was blue. So I know how it feels.
All right, what did Bill Hader do with the paycheck from this movie?
Okay, I think he got the new iPhone, and I think it was like iPhone 9 at the time or something like that, and mine's even older, so what does that tell you about my iPhone? And then also probably took some of that money, bought a new couch, maybe a new laptop, and then started jotting down ideas on that same laptop that he got the money from to do his new show. What's that show again? On HBO? What is it?
Barry.
Barry.
How dare you for not knowing that?
I'm out of it, man, because I was about to say Fleabag, and I was like, God, that's so wrong. Do not say Fleabag. But I just said that.
Wow, what is wrong with you?
I'm in Crisis on Infinite Earths mode, man. I just watched that again, and I'm still kind of confused, but I got Ezra Miller, so there you go.
Spoiler alert. Jeez, man.
It's been 2 weeks, I think.
Yes, it's been 2 weeks. All right, so I'm going to say that Bill Hader used the cachet and the money to fund his as a producer to be able to make Barry, and that's so we're on the same wavelength there. But I am going to justify his performance as Alpha 5 by saying he used this money to then go ahead and make Barry. What do you want to see from the Power Rangers franchise moving forward? Look, I really like this movie more than Brian. I would love to see a sequel to it. That is not going to happen. For me, I am okay letting this franchise be. I am okay with letting it be for the kids and having it just be a Nickelodeon show that people watch and people enjoy, and that is fine. I do not need a Power Rangers movie. I do not need a Power Rangers multiverse. We are going to be inundated with multiverses, and we will be tired of them. 3 years from now, we are going to be so tired of multiverses. Your heads are going to spin. So just let it be. Don't do it. Lionsgate, Saban, who's ever in charge, just let it be.
Well, it's already in production, so I don't think you can stop it now. So I'll go with we're in multiverse mode with the pop culture world right now. The MCU is not quite there, but we're gonna get there, even though they teased it last year. But yeah, the multiverse is real. It's strong, and that's why I want to see Jason David Frank, Amy Jo Johnson, and what's his name? The Jason Austin something?
Austin St. John.
Austin St. John. I want to see them all come back, man. And I want to see this weird, because I know they've done it in the show. They've done these crossovers in the show. I just want to see it on the big screen, and I want to see it with a crowd that appreciates it, a mix of families that, kind of like that crowd with Force Awakens, where it was like a mix of like older Power Rangers fans or like older Star Wars fans with the young Star Wars fans. I want that. And I felt like you didn't really get that with this movie. And I want that kind of crossover, especially with the audiences, to connect the two generations from the last 20 years, maybe even three if you go back to the 80s, because some people, I'm sure, were following the original from the 80s and 70s. So there's even that. I just want some kind of, I don't know, connection to that. Maybe just one movie where they all kind of cross over and give everyone this happy like moment. It's a crossover, and go from there. And then maybe reestablish and reassess and go fresh in like 5 years with a whole new thing, and maybe not even do Rita and all that anymore, and just come up with something new.
So we're going to have to agree to disagree that we're there, but what we will not disagree with is that it has been a lot of fun reliving our childhoods with the first two Power Rangers movies and then taking a look at one of the recent efforts. So it's been a ton of fun, and I'm glad that we at least got to review all three of these movies. We are going to be taking next week off. So basically what's going to be happening is the first Tuesday of the month, we will be doing Kevin Ford and I will be doing a podcast about Breaking Bad. It's going to start next week, and the first season, we will be discussing those first 7 episodes. So that is what you have to look forward to. The first Tuesday of every month, based on the release schedules of the different podcasts here at The Real World. That is just what makes the most sense. And it also makes sense because, quite frankly, we have done so many superhero movies, we're kind of running out of them. So it is okay if we take a week off here and there. So when we come back in 2 weeks, we will be doing a review of the theatrically released Birds of Prey movie. So that is what we will be reviewing in 2 weeks. We'll be reviewing the brand new Harley Quinn movie, and I'm going to try and get Brian to watch the Harley Quinn animated show so that we can also review that. And we may even review and talk about the Jay and Silent Bob reboot. So we've got a mishmash of things that we could be discussing in a couple weeks. But one thing I can definitively say is in 2 weeks, we will discuss Birds of Prey.
That's for sure. And I still don't know what to expect going into that movie. So I'm just going to go in like totally open-minded and marking out to see Rosie Perez on the big screen again after so long, because it's goddamn Rosie Perez. And I know not a lot of people appreciate that, but she was like a 90s thing from my childhood, because I remember her from like a bunch of different movies, man. I can't even think of I guess White Man Can't Jump is like the number one, but I mean Rosie Perez was like a big deal in the 90s, so to see her come back, I'm excited.
And she was blackballed, so that is all the more reason to go and support one of her movies, because she was unfairly blackballed because people in Hollywood are pigs.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, and probably I'm sure they're going to allude to some kind of weird meta, something related to that in the movie, because yeah, it's all about a bunch of male assholes getting their comeuppance, and I'm totally for that.
All right, so for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast this week. We will see you all again in 2 weeks.
I guess Zordon is the danger then.